What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and you're listening to a special B-side. For those of you who are new here, B-sides are essentially episodes we have in between our more formal episodes, and they are even somehow more lit than our regularly scheduled content. That's right, more lit. Now, again, this B-side is special because we have Alicia Davis, CEO and founder of Cubicles and Curls. Alicia, please introduce yourself.
What up? This is Alicia. I am the creator and founder of Cubicles and Curls, which is a blog platform for Black professionals doing their natural hair thing, doing their career thing. We talk about hair care, we talk about hair styling, we talk about career advice, the whole thing.
Come on now, that's right. And it's special also, not just because Alicia is here, that's plenty special, of course, but because we're doing like an interview / collab episode. That's right. Alicia, why don't you walk through how we're going to do this today?
All right. So today's episode is something that I felt was very important to talk about because we don't talk about it enough. We're talking about what to do when you are unemployed. And that could be, you got fired, laid off, underemployed, just haven't found a job yet. Goes through it at some point in their life, and we really wanted to get into the whole nitty-gritty of how that feels, what to do, how to look for a next job, and just letting you know it's okay and it happens.
That's a great subject. I'm excited about this because just labor statistics show that non-white professionals are more likely to be unemployed and more likely to be unemployed for longer stints of time. So it's really important that we, I believe, have this conversation, have fun with it, of course, but really just address it and address it courageously because it's part of your career journey. And there's a quote here. Do you want me to read it or do you want to read it, Alicia?
Sure, I'll read it.
Okay.
If you're talking about the Anna Wintour quote.
Yes.
So Anna Wintour, which is the editor of Harper's Bazaar. Oh, sorry. No, I think she's the editor of Vogue. She used to work for Harper's Bazaar, and she said, "I worked for American's Harper's Bazaar. They fired me. I recommend that you all get fired because it's a great learning experience."
For sure. So, right. So we want to talk about our experiences of losing jobs, what we did during unemployment, and what we did to find a new job. So, Alicia, do you want to start or you want me to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start.
Okay.
I would like to say that I've probably been unemployed a total of 3 times under different circumstances. Once when I was in college. Another time it was just kind of like a issue of lack of work. The company had to downsize. And another time I actually got fired. So those experiences really resonated with me because, it's something that I think that we're ashamed of a lot. And one thing when I was going through that at first, I was just so down. But once I got out of it, I kind of saw it for the gift that it was at that time.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I was thinking about this as we met, of course, and you proposed this topic. I was thinking about, okay, so I don't think I've ever been fired, right? And I haven't really ever been like asked to resign or anything like that either. But I do remember in college just not having a job and desperately wanting a job. And that journey of like getting into the workforce for the first time for real and trying to like prepare myself for a real career after college. Then I also remember, though I did not get fired and I wasn't asked to resign, I do remember quitting a job because the environment was so toxic, right? It was super racist, and I was getting called out of my name and threatened and things like that. It was just like a genuinely like dangerous and toxic environment. And I remember for about 3 or 4 months, I was just like freelance consulting. I remember that, and that was a major part of my learning journey as well. So I'm excited about this for sure. And so then what did you do to find a job? Like in those instances.
Everyone's been fired?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
think not everyone's been fired, but I think everyone faces unemployment either after college or underemployment.
Yeah.
Sometimes things just happen where you're in between jobs, or like you said, you quit because you just can't take it anymore. And so I think at some point everybody goes through one of these phases where you just, in between jobs.
Absolutely. And something I've also realized is how big, so the gig economy, which is like a whole nother podcast episode, but I think in that same vein, contract employment, right? And working through temp agencies and contracting agencies where you're not like you're not your own boss, but like you're working through an agency that if they don't staff you on a role, then you don't have any paper, right?
Right.
And that type of work lends itself to being underemployed for months at a time.
Exactly. And so, even if you are making paper, you don't have benefits.
Right. You don't have benefits, right? So yeah, I mean, let me ask you, what did you do in those seasons of unemployment? What were you doing to find a new job?
Right. So the first time, when I got laid off, my company was downsizing, it just was a matter of having scared. I had rent. I had moved out, like boldly moved out of my mother's house for a year. And I was like, I have to make ends meet. So, I reached out to like my contacts. I was like really just kind of nervous about it, and I found a job kind of quickly just because like I needed something to do. So I found a job. It was decent. I was like, okay, we can do this. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was outside of my field, but it was a job. It had benefits. And I was happy for it until, finally it kind of came out that really that job wasn't going to be a good fit. And, they agreed it wasn't a good fit. We had to part ways. After that, I was unemployed for a year, but this time more so voluntarily. I wasn't looking for a job at first because I really wanted to use the time, because prior to that I was unemployed for like 2 months. And I was like, if I ever find myself in that situation again, I'm going to use the time a little differently. So I used the time to kind of reassess the kind of person I am, what my goals are, work on projects that I didn't get time to do when I was working full time. And I was really, I had saved up enough. So I was really just working to, get myself ready to work and to come back to the workforce before I started looking for a new job.
So those are great points. And it's interesting because I think for me, when I took a step away from the really toxic job that I was doing a lot of freelance and like contract work and kind of like staff agency stuff. And I really had to really for me, what I learned and what I really had to really pause, and there was a certain level of intentionality on my side of, okay, well, before I just throw myself headlong into something else, what do I really need to like, because I probably need to find some healing from that situation, right? Like, exactly. And everybody who quits or leaves a job, or, it's not that it always is going to be traumatic per se, but listen, man, leaving a job is hard. Like, even if you leave a job for something else that might be better, you kind of got to wash some of that old stuff off, right? Like, you need to, like, there needs to be a certain part of you that needs to kind of let it go. It's kind of like getting out of a relationship, or
exactly,
to be honest, right? Like platonic or romantic.
Because when I was saying, I was like, am I describing my breakup, or am I describing when I left the job?
And then you also, your living situation and your savings and your severance and unemployment insurance, stuff like that. I mean, having those things lined up too. Thankfully for me, when I was doing the contract work and the checks were not as steady because I was freelancing and I was doing a bunch of different other consulting work, my wife had a job at the time. So, and because of the way that we budgeted, we lived under our means, nothing went under by the grace of God. But it's important to think about those things too. So, as regardless of what they say, when you resign, when you leave a job, regardless if you leave a job for another job, or you leave a job just because I gotta leave, people say don't make an emotional decision. Listen, it's always going to be an emotional decision. Like, exactly. You will never be able to quote unquote take the emotions out of it. There's going to be some emotion involved with you transitioning away. At the same time, it's important to think through, like, okay, what are my plans once these checks stop, right?
Yep. And to that, it's really, one thing I want to tell people is, if you're quitting, you need to make sure you have the financial means. But however, if you're getting laid off, you might not have had that stacked up, And one of the first things I did when I was laid off, I was like, well, can I get, talked about severance and all that stuff. And I was like, can I get unemployment? And, there's different, I don't know how it works in every state, but, some states you have to have certain reasons. So if you're fired, you might not be able to get unemployment, but if you're laid off, you could, So really that's a conversation, and it is emotional, like you said, but that's really a conversation you do want to have with HR, no matter what the circumstances, and apply for unemployment right away if you can. If you can't apply for unemployment, what I did too, when I was left the second job that I got after I, was laid off for a year, I actually applied to be an SAT teacher. Because I was like, well, what other skills do I have? And randomly I got an email, and it was for Kaplan saying, hey, you want to do SAT teaching? And I was like, oh, I can do that. You might want to, like you said, you tapped into your freelancing, and, think of some other things you can do with the internet. There's so many opportunities to, make a little money on the side to hold you over until you can find something else. And I really want to stress, utilizing those resources as best as you can. If you're in your hometown, you might want to live with your parents. You might want to rent out your apartment, temporarily, Airbnb, whatever you need to do to make sure that you're stable. Because if you feel like you're drowning and you're on the verge of, going into bankruptcy, you're not going to be able to concentrate on getting better and healing.
That's a good point. And it sounds as if really you're having to flex a few different creative muscles.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly what happened.
And I think which leads to another point. Not everyone is super creative and industrious in that way. And so I think it's important to talk to people before you decide to leave, or if you know that you're about to get fired or let go, or there's some type of downsizing. Have some trusted confidants around you that you can talk to as things are happening, so they can maybe help you kind of navigate, or they can point you in the direction of someone who can help you figure out what the next season looks like.
Exactly.
I know for me, when I did leave, because I was depressed. Like we've talked about mental health and mental wellness on Living Corporate before. I have no shame in saying that when I quit that job, I was genuinely depressed and ended up gaining a lot of weight, and did not take care of myself. And it took me some years to lose that weight and a little bit more, but to lose that weight that I gained. And it was crazy because by the time another opportunity came up that was a great opportunity, and I got the job, but I wasn't in the best of shape. I wasn't at my best self. And so I think it's important as well, when you're in that season, that off season, quote unquote, that you don't fall off, right? You go to the gym, if you have some type of whatever your belief system or structure is, pour into your local community, continue to invest in yourself. That way, when you show up at the next job, you glowed up. Now, again, they hired you, so you have some level of goal regardless, but for you to be at your best self. Because I tell you, I regret not being healthier when I started my job, because I would have enjoyed some things better. When I took business trips, I would have been more comfortable. I would have been able to explore the cities more, things of that nature. But I wasn't able to because I was not at I wasn't physically healthy.
Yeah. And I want to peel that back a little bit. When I was laid off as well, I was depressed and, I gained weight. I remember when I did have an interview, I couldn't even fit into any of my suits. And I don't even have money to buy a new suit because I'm, unemployed. But I really want to peel back, a lot of people, when they find themselves in a situation, they do fall into these depressive episodes. And it's really important it's important to let yourself feel the emotions, but you have to tap into your support system. And I think a lot of times why we fall into those depressive episodes is because, one, either because of the trauma of what happened, and two, because we assign a lot of self-worth to having a job. I was embarrassed to go to, events or leave the house because I didn't want anyone to ask me, what are you doing? When are you finding a job? Because I felt so ashamed to just not be having a job for the first time, And I think it's really important. One of the things I did, when I was, unemployed the second time and I was using that me time, was detaching my self-worth from what I do to get paid. what my full-time employment is. And I think that's something, a lot of people need their support system and help to get out of. And I think if anything, I just really want to stress that part alone, that you are not your job. You're more than your job. Your job is going to change 20 times over, and you're still going to be that person you are.
That's so true. And I believe, well, we live in a capitalistic society, and cost of living is going up. Wages are not necessarily matching the cost of living as it continues to increase. And so more and more folks are switching from work-life balance to work-life blend, because really our lives have become work, right? By some degree or another. That's why the gig economy is popping like it is. A lot of people are doing full-time jobs, and they're also Uber drivers and Favor deliverers. Shout out Favor. Shout out Uber. Y'all are not sponsors, but if y'all hear this, I'll let your boy.
What's Favor? We don't have that here.
So Favor is a food delivery service. It's kind of like, it's kind of like, so y'all know y'all have Uber Eats, right?
Like Grubhub?
Yeah, like Grubhub.
That's what we have.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Y'all also have DoorDash, though, right?
We do.
Okay.
We just got that.
Listen, they're getting all this free pub. Yes, but whatever, it's cool. So, so it's Favor is similar to DoorDash. Anyway, it's hard not to disassociate yourself from what you do that keeps food on your table. But the more you can really align yourself with whatever your family, your community, volunteer efforts, and things that really keep you going spiritually, mentally, emotionally, that's going to help you. Because if all you are is your job and you
Zach, sorry, you cut out real quick.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Sorry. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Because if all you have is your job and you lose your job, then what do you have? And so it's important that you're always thinking about that. And I think we're in a really interesting season of self-care and mental and emotional wellness. Like those spaces have been rapidly growing over the past 6 or 7 years. And I think especially for Black and brown people. And so I think it's important, like, to invest in some things of that nature just while you have a job. Like, invest in those things while things are good. That way you're not scrambling if something changes.
It's all about foundations.
It is. So to your point though about being laid off or fired is not a mark of shame, and there's only so much of that that's about you keeping your job that's in your control. And I think that's the thing about there's a term when you talk about job security. Yes, that's the term. So job security is a myth, and but most people think if I have a job and I'm getting paid a salary, that I'm going to nothing can happen that's going to change me from having that job. Like we buy into a certain level of we buy into a narrative that our jobs are extremely stable, and that having a quote unquote steady paycheck is more reliable than being like an entrepreneur or whatever the case is. But the reality is, unless you're like a VP, like someone very senior at an organization, you're really only like 1 or 2 decisions away from you not having a job.
Yep.
Right. And it's interesting as I've gotten a little bit older, like I'm 29, and as I've gotten a little bit older and I'm kind of moving up the ladder a little bit, I'm a manager. So I'm not I'm not making no real moves, but I see a few things differently now than I did at when I was an associate or an entry level employee, because I'm starting to see how things kind of move and push together behind the scenes. Like when I was, and even before my current industry, which is consulting, I was an HR business partner, and I was working with the CHRO. I was working with the COO of a startup, and I was just noticing, okay, there'd be people like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 levels under me at the time. And in their world, they're thinking like everything's hunky-dory, it's all great, blah, blah, blah. They don't know, like, their boss is about to get fired, they're about to get moved to a whole nother department. And the higher up you go, it doesn't seem like anything to you. Like, you have to really practice empathy as you get higher up, because it doesn't seem like anything to you, but to them, like, their whole world has changed. And so I was just thinking more and more about that. Like, if you're an entry-level employee, if you're a non-executive employee, they can make one decision and you end up moving from department A to department G, or department G to unemployment, and it's like that. So
exactly,
it's not in your control. What's in your control is your attitude, your level of gratefulness, and how you show up to work every day, and then how flexible you're being and prepared you're being to find that next thing. But I think sometimes because we buy into the fact that like these jobs are promised, and that and that things are just so secure that we can't fathom, or we kind of, I know I did, I'll speak for myself, that I really was shook when I walked away and I was like, wait, but I thought this was going to work out. I thought this, I thought this, I thought that. You know, am I making any sense?
Yep, absolutely. And I think that I really like that emphasis of it's not in your control, you know? You could have been the best worker, and sometimes it's just a numbers thing, you know? And I feel like once you accept that, you know, if you did your best, fine. If you didn't do your best and you got laid off, you know, really just take time to just learn from, okay, what could I change for next time? I think that, you know, focusing on what you can control really can help you prevent you from going into that whole spiral afterwards.
And it takes a while. Like sometimes it may take, you know, so for me, like I said, I quit that job. I was doing some freelance stuff, and I was underemployed for about 3.5, 4 months. And I've talked to people, and they'll be like, "Man, Zach, that is no time. Like that's great." There are people who are unemployed for, you know, 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. It happens. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go ahead.
Yeah. I said, well, I mean, speaking of that, you know, we should probably pivot into what do you do when you're unemployed and looking for that next job.
No, that's super true. Okay. Mm-hmm. So figuring out what you liked and didn't like about your last position and crafting can help you craft an ideal position and picture for your next job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, I think a lot of times we either over romanticize our jobs or over demonize them, you know? So we're like, that place was terrible, or this was the best place I was ever going to work, you know? And I think it's really important to really think about what you did and didn't like about that job. And when you're going into interviews or applying to jobs, look for the signs. Again, it feels like, again, I'm talking about a relationship. But, you know, I guess, you know, we spend so much time at work, it might as well be.
But it is, though. You spend more time at work than you do with your family.
You do, exactly. So, I mean, I guess the same tenets apply here. So, you know, you might have really noticed, like, okay, this is what I enjoyed about my position. I enjoyed doing these things, and I didn't enjoy doing these things. Sometimes I was even able to, like, look at job descriptions, and I could tell this isn't a place it wasn't gonna like. Right. You know, can work without structure, you know, quick on their feet, doesn't need much direction. And I was like, so you're basically saying you don't know what you're doing and you want me to come in and figure it out, and you're not going to help me at all. And I was like, I'm good. You know, like you learn how to read in between the lines after a while. I remember I sent one of my friends one, and I was like, this job wants me to work 20 hours a day. I could tell. Right. They didn't say it, but I know what fast-paced environment and willing to go the extra mile means, you know? No. Mm-hmm. They're setting you up to be like, this is going to be hard.
Right, that's what they're telling you.
That's not something you want. You know, you got to read in between those lines. Even in the interview, you know, we get so scared asking people questions, like the real questions about these positions. But that's your only chance to figure out if it's going to be the right for you before you get in there. So, you know, ask them, why did the last person leave? You know, what's the hardest part about this job? You know, or what are the challenges of this job? Or who do you think is going to be a fit for this? And be realistic with yourself of if what they're saying sounds right to you.
Those are great. That's just great advice. It's, you know what, Alicia, you should really have like a blog or something. Oh, wait. Okay. So no, you're right though. And it's, you know, also recognizing what your non-negotiables are. Right. Mm-hmm. So for me, I know, so I quit that one job because it was just super toxic, but I've quit some other jobs too. Like, so I was working at a major retailer, and I realized that for me, I had to walk away from that job because the scope was way too small. Like, it was focused on a store. That was it. And so I knew that when I quit that job, I said, okay, I gotta find a new job that's gonna give me more space to be autonomous and be creative and really flex some other muscles that I believe I have. And so a non-negotiable for me was working in the retail industry at a store level. Like that was a non-negotiable. That was a non-negotiable for me. A non-negotiable was having an extremely limited scope. That was a non-negotiable for me. But you learn that after you reflect and think through what you did and did not like about your last place of employment. There's things I did like from that job, and so I took those things forward as well. But because we're just gonna keep on making relationship references. Sometimes we have friends, and if you don't have any friends like this, then look in the mirror and then point at the mirror, and then you're that person. They kind of date the same person.
Right? Over and over again.
Over and over again. It's like, yo, like, you kind of got like a type. No, I don't. I don't have a type. I kind of have a type. And like, you keep making the same mistakes with this one than you did with this one. So, and I bet your friend or you, if you look at the person looking in the mirror, you probably haven't like paused and reflected. Okay, what is it that I like and don't like about this? And like, because there seems to be a pattern here. And a lot of us do that in our careers too. It's like I have people who are like, they are serial careerists. They'll take the same job and quit for the same reasons over and over and over and over and over. So it's really important that you're thinking through what's working and what isn't working.
Yeah, I agree.
So this resume cover letter refresh, now that's important.
Yes. So, I thought my resume was pretty bomb. Like, I think I've always had a pretty solid resume, but you know what? I was putting out feelers and I was getting phone interviews, but I wasn't getting past the phone interviews. So I was like, what's going on here? Like my resume is dope. One job, like I matched it exactly. Like, and it was a pretty niche job. So I was like, how could you not hire me? Like I am the one, But what I did was I actually at some point got a career coach because one, I was kind of not like, I was like ready to apply, but I was still feeling a little bruised from like, past experiences, worried. So, a lot of times when you're writing these cover letters, it requires you to reflect on your experiences at these past jobs. And sometimes that's causing you to live in the hurt and the trauma all over again. Just writing the cover letter can be an ordeal because you're just like, wow, that job was really terrible. And it's coming out into your cover letter how wishy-washy you were about that job, So what I did was I actually got a career coach to rewrite my cover letter for me, Like I have her and she gave me advice. She rewrote my resume because one thing she said was, you're listing out your things you've done, but you're not really giving me that, I'm a star kind of thing in your resume. You're mostly like, I did this, but you're not really telling me I accomplished this or like, I'm the winner or like I'm the best because of this, Y, and Z. It wasn't shining. And my cover letter was much of the same, with more just listing things that I've did, but not really like spelling out why I stand out. And she was telling me that, I think that comes from a place of you trying to be humble and you're trying to, like downplay yourself a little bit because you're bruised. Mm-hmm. And so like getting her to refresh my resume, really, honestly, the results were instant in terms of callbacks, in terms of moving on to the next level, in terms of even just changing my interview style. Cause I realized, I was kind of, like, I felt like, okay, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am because, like, I had been laid off before. But I was like, no, I am as good as I think I am. And that was just an isolated incident,
That's right.
And it's really just about your attitude. But sometimes you just need someone else to step in and do that work for you because it's too painful to do it yourself.
Man, I 100% agree. I think the other thing I'd like to add to the idea of a resume cover letter refresh is a LinkedIn cover letter, LinkedIn refresh. Mm-hmm. Right. So, LinkedIn is like LinkedIn, first of all, as I'm going to put my futurist hat on real fast. So as millennials and Gen Z get more into the workforce and they start engaging LinkedIn, it's going to become, and it has already, if you've noticed, become way more social and like almost kind of like Facebook in certain ways, good and bad. And, and so the point being that it's going to become an indelible part of your identity, professional and personal. Like, even if you Google someone's name, their LinkedIn pops up. Their LinkedIn pops up more than their Facebook does. Mm-hmm. And so, making sure that you have a professional and accurate depiction of who you are and what you want to present on LinkedIn is huge too, because that can have instant results as well. I've seen certain companies, if your LinkedIn isn't popping, it's kind of like I don't really know. Like that can be the difference maker, to your point, between like a phone interview and then an actual in person.
Because let's face it, everybody looks everybody up nowadays. As soon as I hear your name, looking you up. What can I find? Right. So either if you have a generic name, you might be safe, but if you don't, you better have that LinkedIn popping. And, just real quick on that, make sure your picture is great. Or, it doesn't have to be a professional headshot, but it shouldn't be like a selfie, shouldn't be inappropriate. It should look like how you would probably come for an interview.
It really should, though. And I mean, and I'm going to say this, at this point, so again, a lot of this speaks to financial privilege and access. So everyone can't afford like a professional headshot. At the same time, these cell phones, really?
Right. If you have an iPhone 10, just go against a white wall and take that picture.
Get a nice outfit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Get some drip. Okay, yep. Side note, because we're in 2019, and Ade and I would insert slang in 2018, but we did not always give context to the slang. So, and I have, and we have
explanatory comma.
Absolutely. And we have aspiring allies and non-black and brown folks who listen to the show, and people will hit me up and be like, "Hey, what does the bag mean?" And I'm like, "Oh, the bag is like the money and like the wealth or the opportunity." So anyway, so drip, for everyone who's listening who doesn't know, so drip is your fit, right? So drip is not to be confused with sauce, which is more influence and swag. One can have swag and sauce but not have drip, and one can have drip but not have swag. So with all that being said, you'll be dripped out right in the picture, white background, iPhone X. It'll be great. Now,
as a friend of mine said, drip or drown.
Ooh, that's funny to me. Yes,
I think that's my favorite thing I've heard all year.
Drip or drown. You gonna have to drip or drown. That might be the subtitle for this little B-side, drip or drown. That might be the hashtag, drip or drown. So don't, and then the last thing, don't let desperation lead you to another job that won't be a good fit. Mm-hmm. That's real. Yeah.
I think that's important because you know what? I get it. Your bills are coming down. You feel like you need to get a job ASAP. You really need to take, like I said, just make sure you're making the right decision for you. The money could look good, but like if it's something that's going to make you be working 20 hours a day and you're not the type of person that likes to work 20 hours a day, if it's something where you're going to be working from home a lot or you're going to be traveling, you need to make sure it's a good fit, else you're going to end up quitting or they're going to end up letting you go again. Like you really want to make sure that this next move, a lot of times what people do is they'll start applying to any job. Right. It's not even in their field,
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, I think I could do that. That's when you're getting desperate, and people can tell, you really want to stick to what you want to do because, you might be at that job for a long time. If you want to be, exactly, if you want to be in consulting, but you're taking a job over in hospitality, and you might end up staying there for a year. And now you have a year of something outside of your field on your resume, and you're going to have to work to explain, how it lines up. Because what I always think is funny is, people are very narrow-minded when they look at your resume, and they're really only looking at your last thing. You have to do so much explaining. Like, I had a whole major in healthcare. All my jobs were in healthcare except for one, and people only focus on the one that wasn't. And I was like, I was only there for 3 months, And it's so crazy how things like that, like, so that's what I'm saying, being intentional about, your next move, even if it means passing up like a bunch of other, could be easy wins, you really want to make sure your next one's going to move along in your career path and not just pay the bills.
No, I super agree with that. I kind of make, see, now this is your fault, Alicia, because you brought up relationships, and now I'm thinking about all these relationship jokes, but it's kind of like, when you might have a breakup, but it's cold outside, like it's cuddle season. And so it's like, man, I gotta find somebody.
Oh no, yeah. Don't get a warm body job.
Don't get anybody. Don't get a rebound job is my point. Like you gotta,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Find somebody that is going to put a ring on it, or that you will put a ring on. I don't know. You know, people. Hey, everybody's proposing everybody. It's no problem. No judgment. But the point is, figure out what is gonna really be stable for you, because this is the two things. First of all, people very much so underestimate time, and underestimate it in terms of how fast it can go by, and the fact that you can't take it back. So to your point earlier, you said about a year in hospitality, like you can look up and you're gonna have there are people who are like, yeah, I got this job 5 years ago because I just wanted something because I got laid off and I was just trying to find something, and you look up and it's like, okay, this is your job now, and you don't like it, or you've been doing this thing for a year and a half, 6 months to a year, and then you try to interview somebody, you try to interview for what you really want, and people are like, okay, well, why were you doing this? Like, what are you going to say? And not to say that you're stuck. I mean, it happens, but it's going to take a little bit more work in how you craft your story.
Exactly.
And convince interviewers that, okay, no, I'm really actually interested in this. Now, I would think that folks with a modicum of empathy and logic would recognize that life happens and that we don't always land in the jobs that we want. But oftentimes, like you said, it's weird. Like, people put on these weird blinders during interviews and don't always think about context and how just things shift and change and everyone isn't the same. But anyway, this has been great. Alicia, what else do we have? Before we go ahead. You go ahead.
I said, before I go, I just want to ask, the last question was, you know, if you're in an interview and it comes up, why did you leave your last job? And it's not exactly an easy answer. That's something you want to practice ahead of time, because that's always going to come up.
You got to practice that.
You know, one of the things I said when I was laid off was, you know, my company was going in a different direction. We were shifting from the work that I was doing to a different sector, and that's not something I wanted to do. So, you know, we agreed that it wasn't a fit, and I left. And another job, the one that I was there for 3 months, I told them, you know, it was a temp job. Because basically, when it ended up working, it just didn't transfer over into full time, you know? So don't lie, but have some sort of, like, you know, palatable truth into your interviews, and practice your answers so that you're not coming off nervous or, you know, it feels like there's something shady going on there. I think that's really important. But I do want to stress that most places, at least in New York, you know, your past employer shouldn't tell your next employer that you were fired, because that would mess up your chances of getting a new job. I think there's some legality to that.
No, it's
so
illegal.
I want you to, yeah, it is, right?
It's illegal. Yeah.
Exactly. So I want you to have that comfort in knowing that, you know, you kind of are getting a fresh slate, as long as, you know, you kind of know how you're going to work it. Don't feel like it's going to be like a scarlet letter that follows you for the rest of your life.
No, that's super true. And it's interesting because you really got to figure out ways to politicize, or not politicize, but politic that answer. So for me, you know, I was at a major retailer for like less than a year, and so even now I'm 7 years into my career, and people will say, okay, well, you know, why were you here for that? I'm like, well, you know, that really gave me and like my answer now is that really helped me baseline some HR knowledge and best practices. However, I realized that the scope of that retailing context was not conducive for my professional development, and so I ended up finding X, Y, and Z, and I just kind of transitioned. And I think it's also important, now that we're talking about just how you interview and walk through your career, that you have like a story and an overarching narrative that you're speaking to. So if you talk about it from that perspective, then you're kind of you're talking about these jobs as just points in your journey, and not necessarily I was this, I was this, I was that. It's, hey, for me, as an example, I'll say something like, my name is Zachary, and I'm very passionate about people. And so you'll see in my career, as you look at my resume, all of the roles that I've had involve people. And then from there, I just kind of walk through the story of, I was here, then I was in oil and gas, then I was in pharmaceuticals, now I'm in consulting. And it makes sense, as opposed to, like I said, having like a really segmented story, because that's how people like to, that's an older way of thinking. But just remember, we're transitioning now into a much more fluid workforce, and it's okay to be at different places and have different experiences. But Alicia, to your point, I 100% agree. that you have to have some practice and verbiage behind how you're going to spin that.
Yep.
Okay, now look, this has been dope. And I guess this is the first one of this kind. This has been pretty fun for me. Have you had a good time?
I had a great time.
Okay, before we let you go, where can people learn more about Cubicles and Curls?
Okay, so you can learn more about Cubicles and Curls on our blog, cubiclesandcurls.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at Cubicles and Curls. Sometimes I'm on Twitter, and that's just Cubicles Curls, but, Instagram is definitely the place where you'll usually find me.
Hey, awesome. Well, that does it for us, y'all. Thank you for joining us on the Living Corporate Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Living Corporate, Twitter at livingcorp_pod, and subscribe to our newsletter through living-corporate.com or living-corporate.co or livingcorporate.co, livingcorporate.tv, livingcorporate.org. I know, yes, that's right. At least we got them all. So we don't have livingcorporate.com because Australia owns livingcorporate.com. I know, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, if you have a question you'd like for us to answer and read on the show, make sure you email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. This has been Zach, and you've been listening to Alicia Davis, founder and CEO of Cubicles and Curls. Peace.
Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.